This is an article from mysteriousuniverse.org entitled "The Creepiest Modern-Day Robots of All. That's What the Black-Eyed Children Just Might Be," by Nick Redfern. There can be no doubt that one of the creepiest phenomena to have surfaced in the last 2 decades is that of what have become infamously known as the Black-Eyed Children. It would be overly simplistic to suggest they are merely the offspring of the men in black and the women in black of the UFO field. Admittedly, though, there are deep similarities, such as the clothing and their obsessive need to get into people's homes. Not only that, the BEC might well be robots. Before we get to that aspect of the story, let's first take a look at how, and under what specific circumstances, the Black-Eyed Children came to prominence, and why they just might be robots. We'll also take a look at a few classic cases. None of them are particularly heartwarming, as if you really needed to be told that. Although today we have people who claim to have seen the BEC in the period from the 1930s to the present day, the very first reported case didn't surface until January 1998. The location was the Lone Star State, specifically the city of Abilene. The story revolves around a man named Brian Bethel, a journalist who works for the Abilene Reporter news. It was late one night when Bethel's life was changed, and he came to realize that there are dangerous, supernatural entities in our midst. It was close to 10 p.m. when Bethel had the kind of close encounter that one never, ever forgets. He had pulled up at a mall not too far from his home to deposit a check in a mailbox. All was quiet and dark. Bethel, using the lights of the mall to illuminate the interior of his vehicle, was writing the check when he was rudely interrupted. He jumped with surprise at the sight of a couple of kids who were standing next to the car, on the driver's side. But there was something about these kids that rang alarm bells in Bethel's head. In fact, as Bethel would imminently learn, things were wrong in the extreme. Bethel stared at the pair and couldn't fail to see just how incredibly pale the face of one of the boys was. The other had what Bethel described as olive-colored skin. Both boys were around 10 to 14 years of age, Bethel estimated, and both were dressed in pullovers. Only one of the two boys spoke. He claimed that he wanted to see a movie, Mortal Kombat, at the local cinema. But there was a problem. They had left their money at home. Could Bethel take them to their homes to get some cash? Bethel near instantly realized that this whole situation had an air of dark and disturbing theater about it. There was an undeniably unsettling agenda at work, and it had absolutely zero to do with movies. Bethel awkwardly hemmed and hawed for a few moments, something which caused the talkative boy to become ever more insistent that Bethel let them in the car. Then, things became downright eerie and chilling. Bethel found himself almost mind-manipulated, to the point where, to his horror, he could see that his hand was heading to the driver's side door, with the intent of opening it, but without his control. Bethel, fortunately, broke the enchanting spell and didn't open the door after all. This clearly incensed the talkative boy, who amped up the pleas to allow them into Bethel's car. It was then, for the first time, that Bethel finally got a good look at their eyes. They were completely black. The two boys realized that, by now, they were losing the battle to be permitted to get into Bethel's car. On this very point, Bethel himself said that the boy who did all of the talking, quote, wore a mask of anger, end quote. The boy, now displaying a look on his face which was part frustration and part anger, almost shouted, "We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in." Bethel, terrified, did nothing of the sort. What he did do was to slam the car into reverse and head for home, completely panicked by the whole thing. Oddly, as he drove away, Bethel looked back, only to see that the boys were nowhere in sight. In what was clearly an impossibly quick time, they had vanished, and thus was quickly born a legend. It's a legend that shows no signs of stopping. It's only getting worse. Tales of what have become known as the Black-Eyed Children have now been circulating for a couple of decades. The witnesses are many. The cases are creepy and bizarre, but it's fair to say that we still don't have a solid answer as to what they are or what they want. It's worth noting an intriguing UFO connection to the very strange saga of the Black-Eyed Children. They have deep parallels to the notorious time-traveling Men in Black, who have, for decades, terrorized and intimidated into silence numerous witnesses to UFOs. Just like the BECs, the Men in Black have a propensity for knocking on doors late at night. The two mirror each other in other fashions too. Like their child counterparts, the MIB will not enter a home until they are specifically invited to do so. Shades of vampire lore, legend, and very often movies. Both the MIB and the BEC wear black. Both wear headgear, hoodies for the black-eyed children, and 1950s-era fedoras for the MIB. And there is another intriguing issue. Very often the men in black wear thick, wraparound black sunglasses. I have to wonder if this MIB sunglasses angle is done not just to provoke a menacing atmosphere, but to mask a pair of emotion-free, solid black eyes of the type that the black-eyed children are described as having. In that sense, and just perhaps, the men in black and the black-eyed children are one and the same, one in adult form and the other in child form, but both following the same secret agenda, whatever that may really be. So, where does that all leave us? Well, it admittedly leaves us with a lot of questions and not a great deal else, but they are questions that a certain, acclaimed and dedicated researcher of the black-eyed has done his very best to resolve. Undoubtedly, the leading investigator in this field and the author of the book The Black-Eyed Children, David Weatherly, has collected and studied dozens of such cases, demonstrating the sheer scale of these weird and unsettling events. David's work has addressed a variety of theories for the origins and presence of the BECs, that they might be demonic in nature, or predatory spirits, or possibly even products of the human mind, given some semblance of physical life in the real world. Notably, David has also spent much time researching the theory that the black-eyed children have nothing less than an alien lineage. David cites the case of two women, Anne and Marcia, who have both had alien abduction experiences and who have also both encountered the BECs. And, in Marcia's case, in the now typical, quote, knocking on the door and demanding to be let in, end quote, situation. Of strange cases such as these, David says, quote, why would an alien race want, or need, to create hybrid beings? There are a number of proposed theories to explain why such an experiment may be taking place. These theories range from a dying race that needs an injection of fresh DNA in order to survive, to time travelers attempting to correct a mistake made in their past, which is our present. End quote. More words from black-eyed children expert David Weatherly. They are words that fit comfortably with what we have seen so far. Quote, an even more sinister theory that has followers postulates that the Greys are actually attempting to take over our world by slowly breeding us out and phasing in beings with alien DNA. Over time, the human race will fade away to be replaced by the quote-unquote superior DNA of the Grey aliens, adherents say. End quote. Ron told me that a week or so after reading my Paranormal Parasites book, it was published in May 2018 and Ron bought his copy a couple of weeks later, he woke up in the dead of night with a pounding headache, a dry mouth, and a rash on his arms, which was gone by morning. Worse still, he was unable to move. This is a real phenomenon that many of you will have heard of, sleep paralysis. As is typical in such cases, Ron immediately found himself filled with fear. This is hardly surprising. Standing at the side of the bed were two young children, maybe 10 or 11 years in age, who stared at Ron through completely black eyes. Their skin was pale and they were both dressed in black hoodies. In seconds, Ron's bedroom was flooded with apocalyptic images of a flattened world, of millions dead, and of the sky filled with blackness. Ron knew what the cause was. A huge nuclear mushroom cloud dominated what was left of the city. Suddenly, the image was gone, as were the BEC. Ron told me that he had near sleepless nights for the next 3 nights. Thankfully, the BEC did not return, nor did the nightmare. Adrian Clark, of England, told me a similar story. In Adrian's case, it was around 3 a.m. in September 2018, and he too suddenly found himself wide awake with a pair of black-eyed children looking at him from the foot of the bed. Both had the completely black eyes, but were dressed in orange robes. Suddenly, and similar to Ron's experience, Adrian briefly found himself deep in the heart of a nightmarish world of billions dead and the earth devastated. He fought against the paralysis and finally managed to break the spell. In seconds, the image was gone, as were the BEC. Moving on, there is the account of Jennifer, who I met at the September 2018 Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and who lives in Point Pleasant. After I gave my lecture on my The Black Diary book, Jennifer came up to my table and shared with me her experience, which occurred in April 2018. She too was woken from her sleep by a pair of pale kids with huge, dark eyes. One of them pointed to one of the walls in Jennifer's bedroom, which was suddenly transformed into an approximately 8-foot by 8-foot image of a nuclear explosion. Jennifer told me that, for reasons she wasn't sure, she somehow knew that the city was Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She has never been to Milwaukee, nor does she have friends or family there. Like Ron and Adrian, Jennifer was shaken to the core by her experience. I have 7 more cases in which witnesses to the BEC, after their encounters with those dangerous kids, had extremely vivid dreams about future events. 5 of them were a vivid, worldwide, nuclear war in the 21st century, a war that all but destroys the Western Hemisphere and ravages the rest of the Earth. Interestingly and disturbingly, in 5 of the cases, North Korea turned out to be the culprits that sent the deadly ball rolling. And with not a single chance of stopping it, billions were killed. The atmosphere was black for decades, a nightmarish phenomenon known as a nuclear winter, something that, theoretically, will occur if we have a worldwide nuclear war and millions of tons of radioactive dust is thrown into the atmosphere, possibly for decades. In some way, these nightmares of disastrous future times mirror what we have learned about the multiple stories of dreams of a radioactive apocalypse in 2017. Are the black-eyed children warning us of a future that is destined to destroy us? Or, keeping the matter of timelines in mind, are the BEC trying to tell us, in their own eerie, strange way, that this is only one possible scenario, a scenario that can be avoided if we do our utmost to avoid the worst? Let us all hope so. The possibility of the black-eyed children being robots of an incredibly sophisticated nature is fascinating. Consider the following. These creepy kids have skin that looks like high-tech, expertly formed plastic or rubber. They have a mannequin-type aspect attached to their appearances. They repeat the same words over and over again and in loop style, no less. They seem to lack a sense of self-awareness. Their words are spoken in what can only be termed parrot fashion style. Even their clothing, black hoodies, seems to have come straight out of a conveyor belt in a factory. Of course, the big question is, who has manufactured these dangerous kids? Quite possibly, that's the weirdest part of the whole mystery.